I feel like, do you think that as we get older and ostensibly more popular, we'll kind of like take the gloves off more and we'll start just like
I
being
think it's
unhinged.
also as well as like, I don't know, my Lilium days now are like a CEO will go at the company, like a whole, product testing campaign, all that type of stuff. And as it becomes distant future, like you can all have a laugh about it.
That's right.
If you're talking about like a current generation product or people who are within the organization right now and you like and respect, it's a little harder to be like, we all do stupid things and those stupid things are hilarious. And I like laugh at myself as anyone else. But they didn't choose to be here, so it's a little rude of me to pick them out.
Right. No. That's definitely true. Yeah, I think like the Twitter incentive is you do get responses if something is recent enough to be offensive, right? So like that maybe changes the equation, but I don't know. I said my first bad thing about Waymo today. So.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Oh, I did. So was it that you're getting the wear and tear on the cars?
Wear and tear on the cars, and I had a handle that was broken, didn't pop out.
Really?
I love it. It's so funny because it's such a luxury thing that the handles pop out when you unlock. But the handle was pre-popped out. I was like, this isn't popping out.
Peasantry. What is this? A horse and cart? It's actually extra fancy these days, but
that's true. That's true. They've elevated. There's this cycle.
Everything does that. I mean, vinyl's the same, right?
Vinyl's very fancy now.
Old cars, there's a trough in the middle. You just have to keep something as wrapping long enough that it increases in value.
Oh, something interesting and kind of relevant again to Tesla everywhere. But I was at the Don't Die conference this weekend.
Yes.
What
did you think?
I have so many thoughts, but but I met a lot of really cool, very interesting people.
Awesome.
One of the guys I met was trying to repair his Tesla Roadster, and it had a broken board on it.
Okay.
Something had shorted.
Yep.
And I was like, well, do you have a schematic for the board or something like that? And he was like, let me text Martin. And I was like,
Who's
okay.
Martin?
I don't know who's Martin. He's texting the founder of Tesla. So I was like,
they did release them.
Oh, they did
release the schematics for the Roadster, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Recently, it was like a year ago now, yeah.
I think he said the switchback in particular was for some reason not there.
The switchback. The flyback? The switch? I don't know. There's
not a car guy. Flyback, perhaps. It looks like it was on the dash. I don't know if that's helpful.
Okay, cool. Whatever, okay. Yeah.
Anyway. So my point is some of the people there were pretty connected, and I'm 29. I was a young person there. Like most of the people were like 30s, 40s,
We're not worried
50s.
About dying yet. Jesus.
Yeah, and actually, the younger people, there's so many weird things. Like I gotta make sure I put a time box on this because there were so many weird things that happened.
Yep.
But the younger people were more resilient to like the concepts and ideas and stuff like that.
Yep.
Then the old people. Older people, I think, were more like, let's go.
Geriatric, you mean? Or?
I did meet a 70-year-old who looked really, really good.
Good on him.
Yeah. And his advice was, which I guess I have no business of spreading. I haven't validated this at all. But he was like, you mess up your knees, your spine or whatever, the stem cell stuff doesn't work. I guess he spent $100,000 on stem cell stuff.
Oh, my God.
So
that
you got to be
a lot.
Got to be a little early on it.
That makes sense. I mean, like... It's true for most things, right? Like, I don't know, scar tissue is never as good as the original, and your joints, like replacing teeth is never as good. And you can do replacements in those senses, and I'm optimistic that some of those stem cells treatments will improve to the point where there is minimal difference now between something like a knee. Like, who cares? Whatever. If you can run, jump, play, etc. when you're 70 because we could fix your knees and they weren't as perfect as when you were 15, great. Like, who cares?
Right.
The one that always gets me is your brain, because even if you could repair damage that made you as intelligent as you were and your memory as highly functional, you're going to lose the memories.
It's a really scary thing because there was a presentation at the end, kind of like this keynote ending presentation, and the guy says, heart disease, we can kind of prevent it if you measure all the time. It's basically preventable. Cancer, basically preventable if you measure all the time. Cognitive decline, like dementia, stuff like that.
You're cooked.
Delay.
Yeah.
We can delay. That's all we can do. So that, the brain is definitely one of the big missing things, right? And also the one that people will probably be most hesitant to experiment on.
Rightfully so. If it's the most sensitive thing, like it's an interest. This is very, very slight sidetrack here, but it's an interesting thing how how being either hand to mouth or having something that can't fail changes your behavior, right? And it's the case in here of like, well, I don't want to experiment on my brain, which might discount future value, but what if I screw up once and I like lose my memories? Like that's terrifying.
Right.
Hell, what? And it's the same if you're a startup bootstrapping. You're like, we are out of here in a month. Like, God, we got to go hard.
Right.
Or if you're literally, if you don't have enough food, how you have to think differently about like, well, I got to go work a job somewhere in order to like eat versus, okay, I can like run off and start a company in San Francisco. It's really interesting how it changes your attitude.
Absolutely. Those kind of dynamics, to me, I don't understand. Like, I can't piece it all together. Like, at the same time, people without funding, it is really tough. And a lot of them, they go off and do other things. The other thing when you don't have funding is you didn't get buy-in from someone where like, I don't know, maybe this is just a social phenomenon, but like, I'm not going to go get hired now. I took money. Like, so I'm in it and there's like not really a reason. Like if you're bootstrapped, you kind of have a reason. Yeah. You owe it to someone to finish it off. People have bet on you. But at the same time, people do really incredible things, especially if they've been like historically just like, bare knuckle, like, like had nothing.
I need to go get some revenue tomorrow so I can like afford next week. Like, okay, yeah, if you're still in the trenches as a startup, then like that's tough. Jeez.
Do you ever think, because it's a particular way of running a company where I think the peacetime, wartime thing is kind of real. I'm not like a super pro wartime. There's a lot of people who are like, every day is wartime, stuff. I don't know if I believe in that because I think you get like really interesting innovation in peacetime, right? Like just conceptually. But do you try to create elements of wartime at Autopile or something like that?
Yeah, I try a handful of ways and I try to make them, there's like a ratio of interesting plus authentic that you kind of need in order to actually convince particularly your co-founders who obviously have the inside information on how wartime you actually are,
right?
To do something quick. And you're like, hackathon, let's go. And like, dude, like I've got, whatever, I've got dinner with my partner tonight, like booked, and you're telling me at like whatever, 4 p.m. that we're going to have a hackathon tonight? Like, go away.
Right.
Like, no. Yeah. Obviously not. Whereas conversely, if you don't do it at all, then like it's just you turn around and you're like, I have millions of dollars. We could just like pay ourselves a salary and play video games as like a bonding thing. You're like, come on. Like there's got to be a happy middle ground there. And there is. That's how people succeed.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's funny you say that though, because I spoke to a founder maybe a couple months ago and he was like, yeah, we took, a couple $1 million and the interest it's generating is just enough so we're taking our time. And I was like, I don't think that's the right mindset. Like,
yeah, wrong mindset. Don't look at the account. Don't look at the interest that's coming in because it's substantial. Like on a few $1 million, you kind of forget about it. But and this is also why they say don't pay yourself too highly. Like if you're living a perfectly good, comfortable life that's comparable to arguments, say Google, and you're your own boss and you can kind of just do whatever, you're really, beholden to no one.
There's some part of everybody that's motivated by the desire to have things. And I think you have to tap into that to some degree with yourself, right? I really want a Cybertruck. That's like of my worldly desires. That's like the thing. And I'm like, I know I can't buy that until like, well, one, I need to get an apartment with a garage.
Okay, that sounds like maybe an easier one.
So there's a lot of steps up I have to do to get to that. And that is at least a little bit motivating.
Yeah, I'm glad. My worldly desire extended to I want a credit card that when you drop it, it goes ting. And that was actually like really really easy to get. And now I have 3 metal cards in my wallet, and they're actively annoying because you can't get them out the same way. Like, oh man, the good old days. The grass is greener on the other side.
I also briefly had a period where I was getting really fancy credit cards, and I could like eat for free at airports.
Oh,
and
these aren't
I
good cards, to be
loved
clear.
that. The metal cards aren't good cards.
No, they're just like everyone gives you a metal card these days. These are just stock standard cards.
Yeah, I guess it's cheap relative to how much they're making off you.
Oh no, I don't pay them interest. But so yeah, I've never been to an airport lounge. I would love to.
They're awesome. I would say they're not awesome, actually. I'm thinking about this a little bit more deeply. They're usually crowded, especially the ones that are available to credit card people, because the deal seekers, we end up corralling.
You self-identify as a deal seeker, hey?
When it comes to airport lounge, because I can't justify, like, it has to be free for me, or else I can't justify it. So I have to do all the math on it to make sure that it works. But getting a free meal, this is gone now. But if you got like a reserve card, you used to be able to get a free meal every time you entered an airport, basically at the airport. And there was like only a couple restaurants it worked for, but it made me love traveling. Like I was so much happier to travel because I get to the airport, have breakfast, have a layover, get like a little snack, whatever.
Nice.
Just spending all the money.
Yeah, I typically just buy the breakfast. It's like $10 and it's really mid, but it works.
Yeah, that's a better strategy. If I was doing out all the math, I'm sure I probably would have reached the same conclusion.
You got to enjoy the chase, enjoy the game.
Yeah, exactly. It tastes better if it's free. That's what I think.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I'm for it. I think the other one actually in companies that's super valuable, and this is a mentality thing too, is give people lunch.
Yes, absolutely. I take this a step further. I would say give them dinner as well.
Dinner's the easy one. If they're staying late, encourage that.
Right.
Keep going. Bring it down to lunch.
It's crazy to me that that's controversial. Somebody is at the company putting an hour. How much are you paying? Like the dinner is, no matter what, always worth it.
It's just like, it's basically free, and it's a win-win too, because there's the employee. They don't want to think about dinner. I mean, at least I don't want to think about dinner as long as it's good food and no worries. It's like practically free to the company, particularly if you get it on bulk.
Right. Absolutely.
And compared to caffeine, which we were discussing a couple of weeks ago now, is like everyone has free coffee. That's an immediate booster, but it's very myopic because they're not better in 6 hours. They're better right now for the next 2.
Right.
Lunch, you're better for the rest of the day.
That's very true.
It's huge. And breakfast even as well. If you can convince your software engineers to come in before, let's say 9 a.m., they can have a free brekkie as well.
How do you feel about the idea of a company as a sort of college campus? Because I think like Meta sort of embraced this, where I go to the Meta office sometimes because my partner works there, and so I get in as a visitor and I eat lunch and dinner and sometimes breakfast and stuff like that. It's really awesome. They have snack fridges and there's all these like social hangout areas and stuff like that. So it seems very modeled to me after like a college campus.
Yeah.
Right? How do you feel about this kind of, because what people say is like, you graduate out of college. Like people start to get families and stuff like that. And you're almost encouraging them to be away from their family by having a college campus at work.
I don't see as much as a moral imposition of it, but I do think that coddling adults like that does breed children. I've met too many, typically Meta employees actually. The Google ones haven't been as bad for whatever reason, who like have this weirdly complainy attitude about really basic life things. And they're like, maybe, I don't know, my theory is that they're too used to getting their laundry done and like given to them, and the free massages weren't good enough today, and my meals that were handed to me on a platter. It's like, when's the last time you ate a sandwich, dude? Just like put some peanut butter on the bread. Like, it's pretty simple. Like, that's what the rest of us have to do. Like, just do it.
It reminds me of this wartime, peacetime thing, right?
Yep,
it's
definitely
too deep into peacetime.
Yeah.
So, Elon has, or I've been told Elon has this thing where every once in a while, it's kind of seemingly random, you go into this extreme wartime thing where suddenly there's this impending deadline that seems arbitrary, but it gets everybody completely committed. And I guess it also has the effect of seeing who is willing to do that complete commitment.
It does.
How do you feel about that? Just kind of like sporadic, like wartime.
This is the exact balance I was talking about with my founders before, and everyone I've ever worked with, really, is if you are actually mission aligned and you're all on the same page that perhaps this is somewhat arbitrary, but guys, like, Tesla's mission, we have to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. Like, guys, this needs to happen. Or, hey, guys, the company, like, we're not making progress. We need to do this to succeed.
Right.
Even if that's not strictly true tomorrow or whatever, like, everyone understands that you need to actually do useful things to succeed.
Right.
And so if they're willing to get on board with it and you can rally everyone and it's around the same cause and accelerate, like, go for it. Yeah. Like, that's awesome. And yes, it makes sense. The problem was, I would say, probably in the last round of Tesla layoffs and maybe the one before that as well, the mission had been accomplished. And so, like, California and the whole EU had said, okay, well, by 2035 or 40 or, whichever, depending on the state you're in, we're banning, new legacy vehicles. And,
no more combustion.
No more combustion. And that, I couldn't think of a better hallmark of, like, at least around the vehicle mission succeeding.
Right.
And that means that things like Tesla Energy, the mega packs, are super exciting. They're like in the Model 3 days, ramping production, changing the whole grid across. That's cool.
Yeah.
Solar, like the solar roofs, the home stuff, the power walls, incredible. Like,
it's kind of like the curse of not being the underdog. Everybody roots for the underdog.
Everyone roots for the underdog. And you can breed that internally to some degree by splitting the companies in various ways and whatnot, but Tesla didn't. And you simultaneously had, like, a pretty well mature optimized product being the Model 3 being mass manufactured, and often the same people, or at least a lot of crossover between that and new products where you're like, we're in the trenches, mission critical, this and that. And then you have like Optimus, which is like mission adjacent at best.
Right.
It's cool, but it's like really cool, don't get me wrong, but does it meet mission spec? Like, objectively, no. It's not accelerating the world towards transition.
And maybe this is a good thing that, like, you have to have a really articulated vision that's not met to drive really smart people. Like, maybe that is a good social function. But it does suck because Tesla is doing really cool things.
They are.
But it's in so many directions, you don't have this one vision anymore.
No.
I don't know exactly what the mission statement behind Optimus would be. It's almost like, humans shouldn't be doing labor.
Make
right?
humans, or let humans do more interesting things.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Let humans do better work.
Is that official? It's
I don't
pretty
know.
good.
I'm not sure, but that's the genuine sentiment behind it as well. It's don't get me wrong. Is it a good mission? Like, yeah, absolutely, it's a great mission. Is it the mission everyone signed up for, so they would, like, put in the hard yards? No, it's not. Like, it's a different thing.
Right.
And so having this sort of false wartime, it doesn't work, because everyone's like, well, this isn't the war I signed up for, and defecting is an option, particularly when your Tesla stock has just gone 10x during the pandemic, and you've literally got millions of dollars. To be clear, I joined at the top, not before it. But like a lot of these people are like, well, I was in it because I was enjoying the people, but I don't want to anymore.
Right. Especially after layoffs and a morale hit, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And sustainable energy was, for many people, an existential risk. It was
still is.
It was huge up there. Yep. Absolutely. I would agree. And as that kind of is closer to mission solved, a non-existential risk, it's hard to compare. Yeah. On false wartime, I've heard about managers reading Elon's biography or something like that and trying to apply those management concepts, but not really having enough authority. Like, for example, not having unilateral authority to fire, or really, like, they might get in trouble. They might, because of skip meetings and stuff like that, if they have somebody work too much or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's like, you have to, it kind of is related to this founder mode thing, which, when did founder mode, I don't know if we've talked since founder mode came out.
I actually have not read all of founder mode, so I can't comment deeply. The analyses I've seen of it, or at least a few of them, have said, is this anything new? Like, this is the advice that he's been giving the whole time, perhaps well distilled, effectively distilled. He's an incredibly articulate writer as well. So this is, founder mode, for anyone who hasn't read it, is a essay from Paul Graham, who is the founder of Y Combinator and an incredible giver of advice for all of us. And so I think that for many, it wasn't actually considered something new as much as a distillation of existing work.
Yeah, I think so. When I read founder mode, which, like, The Paul Graham, I don't think he coined this, but people have come up with, what is not founder mode? It's manager mode. And manager mode is more, I guess, traditional management. You defer to managers rather than getting into the weeds yourself. And one thing that struck me about founder mode is like, I didn't see it as totally compatible with companies with a lot of strong founders. And maybe that is kind of because that's still a gray area. Like even with OpenAI, like Ilya breaking out and doing his own thing and stuff like that. Can you really have multiple people in founder mode at a company? How does that work? I'd love to see something on that.
I think it's like it's an alignment thing. I think you can think of it as a complex number or a vector. And so I've known one of my co-founders, Narayan, for 15 years. Like,
wow.
We like honestly grew up together in a lot of ways. Like back home, I caught up with his mum as well. Like, I know him extremely well. And so if you are extremely well aligned with someone, then you're like, okay, like you want to fire this person. Maybe I'll like ask you like, hey dude, like why'd you do that? But I'm sure as hell not going to contradict him in real life. And I trust that he's making good decisions because in my experience, he is,
Yeah.
And so I think if you have really good alignment, you can get away with it. But I do think that you need exceptionally better alignment than most people would anticipate.
Absolutely. And you need a lot of time too to develop that alignment. I think like a lot of people, there's a difference between founding with somebody who has seen you kind of at your worst or at really bad points, because throughout the life cycle of the startup, they won't, you might not top that. It might stay stable within that range. And so all the interactions are fairly predictable. The founders of, I believe, DigitalOcean were brothers, and they did Techstars. And there's this story that they would literally get into physical fights. They would beat each other up during Techstars.
I have been tempted to get some boxing gloves actually for the office and see how it goes.
We bought boxing gloves at Seve. Yeah.
Nice.
It is kind of funny.
It's kind of incompatible with our earlier discussion of Brian Johnson, keep your brain safe. Maybe no headshots.
That was the other little advice this 70-year-old person gave me. They said, don't do something stupid that like messes up your shoulder because it's not going to come back or whatever. So it made me very conservative. It's a really, this is a big circle back. I don't know how we always circle, but it's really interesting how it's this don't die thing, which is kind of a movement for both measuring. It's almost like a guinea pig movement. Like everybody is supposed to measure and like really pragmatically approach being healthy. And it's kind of both a conservative and like a very progressive movement in the sense that people really don't want to do dangerous things, but people really want to experiment on their bodies.
Yeah.
So it's this super weird mix.
Yeah. It's interesting because when you're one thing you learn in aerospace is safety is the state in which risk is acceptable. It is not the lack of risk.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I was doing some research on dioxins yesterday, which are extremely toxic pollutant. Agent Orange was one of this class of chemicals, for example.
Oh, wow.
And they occur when you're burning some plastics, for example, like PVC, chlorinated plastic specifically. So if you're soldering with PCV shielded wire, don't burn the plastic. It's like really quite bad for you.
Wow.
Super carcinogenic. It's a hormone endocrine disruptor. And there's been a couple of industrial accidents with like large means 30 kilos released over maybe 18 square kilometers.
Oh my gosh.
So only really radioactive.
This can happen when you solder wires?
Well, so it's all about quantities. Actually, I'm long-winded, but it's all about quantities, right? And so, yes, when you burn wood, there is some dioxin release. When you burn plastics, there's orders of magnitude more. And when you have an industrial accident, well, now you're talking serious quantities, but serious quantities means like nanograms, or like picograms per cubic meter of air, kind of deal, like really tiny quantities. Yeah. And so it's all an order of magnitude thing because I wanted to know exactly this. If I were, installing ventilation in the office, if I were trying to, if I did burn some wire, if I like a PCB smoked up on startup,
right?
How toxic actually is that? Because it smells. I do everything I can to avoid it. We ventilate it. We have exhausts, etc. how bad is it? Because for my own sanity, I needed to know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've done a lot of PCBs in toaster ovens, and there's weird smells sometimes, from your components from wherever.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so hopefully in reflow, you're not quite getting as hot as it's necessary in order to generate these types of extremely toxic compounds, just other less toxic compounds.
I guess soldering and reflow is kind of unlikely to do these things. Is that right?
It's below you obviously shouldn't be burning those plastics in that case. So you're below the threshold at which you'll generate these toxic compounds.
Gotcha. Okay.
Very intentionally. If you're getting up to that level, then you've got problems. But if your MOSFET blows up because you ran too much current through it, then that epoxy has just vaporized and burnt. And you're inevitably going to be creating some.
Oh, I see. So if you run a board, you're doing tons of board experiments. If you run a board and it blows up, how bad is that?
Well, yeah, exactly. And so I did a comparison, and it was like, if it was 250 micrograms of FR4 was the reference size of PCB I had. So let's call it 1 gram is equivalent to 14 kilograms of wood burnt. So if you burn a gram, which is actually quite a lot, if you think of it, again, in plastics, as we were discussing before, this is about a cubic centimeter, so 10 mil cube. You end up, it's analogous to maybe a campfire where you might burn 14 kilograms of wood, a small campfire. So is it toxic? Yes. You shouldn't be breathing that, obviously. You wouldn't intentionally breathe all the smoke out of a campfire. And there's obviously other pollutants that this doesn't compensate for. This is specifically dioxins, furans, and brominated dioxin-like compounds.
Gotcha.
But and I need to double check the math on this, so no one take this as a very specific safety briefing. But
yeah, we are not. What are all the disclaimers?
We're not doctors, and this is not official research, published, peer reviewed in any way. But I wanted like these people at the Donut Eye conference. What is safety? And the risk has to be acceptable. Do I consider a campfire acceptable? I do. And do I consider a campfire acceptable if I ventilate it, exhaust it, and filter it through a 4-layer laser-rated filter? Obviously.
Yeah, for sure.
And so can I feel good about that? I can. And I think if you bring this back to the Don't Die conference, you might see people are doing experiments with things like, how much sugar should I consume? Is it dangerous to try not having any sugar? Not really in the scheme of things, right? And so you're always within a safe bound. The risk is acceptable. And maybe some of these people are trying other bits and pieces as well. But
there was some weird stuff going on. Yeah.
But as long as you live within that safe bound, you can continue to narrow and optimize even further.
Exactly. Yeah. Much easier to optimize when you're within safety margins, and a lot trickier when you're not. A lot of moral questions.
A lot of, yeah. And Brian Johnson himself, he experiments on his own body a lot, doesn't he?
Yeah, and he publishes a lot of the data. I think people are confused about Don't Die because it's got all these little elements. It's a little bit of a cult, and then it's a little bit of a definitely. It was funny to me on the cult thing is he really embraces the cult thing, but he almost he's my impression is it's a cult. It's an intellectual cult. We're going to try to be smart about this and prove it out. But if you believe a cult is kind of just a group of people that have a secret that other people don't know about, which is I think that's Peter Thiel's definition of a cult. And he says a good startup is a cult and stuff like that. I accept, it might not be the worst thing to be in a cult. Yeah, well, yeah, it's definitely. Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't want to go on. I got to time box it, but there was a time he was walking into the audience and getting questions and stuff like that, and I was like, this definitely
awesome.
Feels like a little bit of a religious.
And praise hallelujah.
Exactly.
Oh, Seve, so interesting. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Have a good day.